Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by Tower Electronics. For connectors, cables, and more, call 920-435-2973 or visit pl-259.com. And by the Ham Station. Get your new radio or antenna by calling 800-729-4373 or go to hamstation.com.
It's Ham Radio.
Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Ham Talk Live, episode number 20. K-9 Search and Rescue with AJ Ragusa, KC9EVU, recorded live on Thursday, June 30th, 2016. I'm your host, Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Ham Talk Live. Now, if you're tuning in thinking that Valerie Hotzfeld, NB9L, is going to be here, well, she was supposed to be here, but unfortunately, she came down with a migraine late this afternoon, and just was not up to being up, let alone on the show. So we're going to reschedule Valerie. She was going to talk about some of her log analysis talk over at Contest University and how to work some of those DXpeditions. So we'll get her rescheduled just as soon as we can, and hope and pray that she is feeling better soon. So fortunately, over field day, we finally got arrangements made for a backup, and so I didn't think I was going to be calling AJ up to step in quite this quickly, but tonight, AJ Ragusa, KC9EVU, is here to talk about a very special group that's trained in search and rescue using dogs, and how they use ham radio to communicate. So we'll take your calls live in just a few minutes and talk to him. Last week on the show, Sean Kutzko, KX9X from ARRL, was here to talk about Field Day. And if you missed that, you can listen anytime at hamtalklive.com or on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, SoundCloud, or YouTube. So get your EmComm questions and your search and rescue questions and your dog questions ready to go. And after the interview, you could call us on Skype at the username HamTalkLive, or you can call us on the old telephone. It's 812-NET-HAM1, 812-638-4261. And you can also tweet a question. Our Twitter handle is @HamTalkLive. So next, AJ Ragusa, KC9EVU, right after this word from the Ham Station, right here on Ham Talk Live. This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by the Ham Station. For 35 years, the Ham Station has brought new and used radios, antennas, accessories, and equipment to the amateur radio community. Give Jeff or Dan a call at 1-800-729-4373 or order online at hamstation.com. EmStation carries all the major brands like ICOM, Yaesu, and Kenwood. Shop from a wide selection of radio scanners, MFJ accessories, Heil Sound products, Mirage and Ameritron amplifiers, Cushcraft antennas, and more. Easy online shopping and fast shipping are waiting for you at hamstation.com or call 1-800-729-4373. The Ham Station, proud to sponsor this episode of Ham Talk Live.
The early bird may get the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. You're listening to Ham Talk Live with Neil Rapp.
Welcome back to Ham Talk Live. The Ham Station has you covered for both new and used equipment. Give Dan or Jeff a call at 800-729-4373 or go to hamstation.com. Be sure to listen to the show every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time right here on hamtalklive.com. Also check out our Facebook page and Twitter feed. Just search Ham Talk Live. AJ Ragusa, KC9EVU, lives right here in Bloomington, Indiana, where he works in computing for Indiana University. After graduating from there, AJ is the Monroe County, Indiana RACES officer and the Assistant Aries Emergency Coordinator. He uses his computing abilities in ham radio using digital modes, including IRLP, Echolink, and APRS. AJ is a member of Argus, which is a K-9 search and rescue team here in Monroe County, and he has trained his dog Sasha to search for lost people. Argus uses ham radio to communicate during search and rescue events and training exercises. So if you haven't heard of this mode of EmComm, tonight is your chance to learn a little bit about it. So AJ, thank you so much for stepping in and being on Ham Talk Live tonight.
No problem, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Well, we had talked about having you on the show, and we thought, well, that'd make a great backup, and here we are, not even a week from when we talked about it and finalized everything. But tell everybody a little bit about the purpose of having a K-9 search and rescue team, and tell everybody a little bit about what that team does.
So, I mean, really, a K-9 search and rescue team is just a search and rescue team. We happen to have some additional tools, which are the K-9s themselves. So, what's the purpose of a search and rescue team? I mean, that's kind of obvious, right? Our goal is to go find lost people. And one of the things, we're very clear about for anybody who's joining or wants to use us, we only search for people who potentially want to be found. So we're not going to go out searching for somebody who robbed a bank or in some criminal situation like that. That's for the police. What we do is, especially Argus, we are mostly a wilderness search and rescue team. We have some other resources too, such as disaster or even urban search and rescue, but we mostly focus on wilderness. So I'll touch on some of those in a little bit. But basically the idea is that, if you get lost and you are wanting to be found, i.e. you haven't robbed the bank and have millions of dollars that you're trying to get away with, then we will come and start looking for you. And we have a variety of skills that help us do that. And with those skills, we have different resources, or I like to call them tools in the tool belt. So K-9s are one of those tools. And one of the reasons that we use K-9s is that sometimes, for example, there might be a hunter who's lost. Well, maybe he's wearing all camo because he was hunting. That could be very hard to spot, especially if you're searching at night. The dog's nose isn't going to be fooled by the fact that they're wearing camo. And even when they have all of those scent blockers and all those other things, they usually don't work all that well. And so the dog's nose is very good. And so that's why we're using these dogs, is they are an additional tool. Obviously there's a team involved, right? But the dog is basically a multiplier for us. It's a force multiplier. We can search a lot more area a lot quicker with a dog than with a bunch of humans. And so that's the reason we're using them.
Okay, now you use the example of maybe a hunter is lost. Would this be a response to like an Amber Alert or a Silver Alert or something like that?
Potentially. It depends on the situation. And so, there are teams that get called out for Amber Alerts. In Indiana, we have Silver Alerts as well, which are senior citizens who maybe have dementia or Alzheimer's or something, and have wandered off. And so it can be in those situations. One of the things for our team, for example, we will only be called out by an agency with jurisdiction. In Indiana, most of the time that means the sheriff's department. But basically, any police officers, sheriff's departments, volunteer firefighters. Where we are in Bloomington, we have the National Forest Service. So Hoosier National Forest could call us out, or Indiana Department of Natural Resources. So those are the agencies who would call us out. And so yes, potentially an Amber Alert could be one of those reasons for us getting called out.
So it's kind of like with races that, you don't just hear about something and go out and do it. You have to be requested by the appropriate service before you activate.
Yes, we call it self-deploying, and we don't most teams do not self-deploy. They will wait to be called out by a agency with jurisdiction, and there's a few reasons for that. You don't know if there's criminal activity involved, so in case of an Amber Alert, there could be an abduction, and so you don't want to start trampling over clues that they might need at some point in time. But also they're the guys who are going to do some of the initial research and kind of give us our areas to actually start searching in, which is an important aspect of search and rescue.
Now, while we're on the top, I know it's a little off topic, but you also deal in EmComm, in RACES and ARES and that kind of thing. So while we brought it up, let's talk just a little bit about why you don't want to self-deploy in any kind of a ham radio situation.
Well, I mean, first off, you don't want to get in the way. I think that's probably the biggest rule in EmComm is you don't want to get in the way, but you want to provide a service that they're looking for. They're going to tell you what they want, and that's what you want to provide. You don't want to start essentially taking over, or at least that's what it'll appear like to them. So, in my opinion, you want to just hang back and wait for them to request your help. You want them to know you're out there. So, like with EmComm, making sure that, as a RACES coordinator, I make sure that Jim Comerford, our EMA director in Monroe County, and I have a good working relationship. Like you said, I'm the I'm the assistant ARES emergency coordinator with our ARES emergency coordinator. So, we try and work very closely together so that way we know we know what each other's capabilities are. We know how to basically operate together. And so that's one of the big important training things I think here is, you want to provide the services that they want, and you don't want to just show up because they're not ready for you.
In a lot of these bigger disasters, I think what happens is a lot of people will show up and say, I can do this, I can do that. They will self-deploy rather than let them know they show up. And they're not ready for that yet. They haven't organized everything and figured out, where things are, and they're just not ready for that yet, and you're just going to slow things down by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right, having volunteers, if you have a lot of volunteers showing up, that is a lot of additional resources that you have to deploy, right? Because all of a sudden now you need some way to get them food and water. Maybe you need to get them. Maybe you'll need 50 porta-johns by the time you get all the volunteers there. That and so they need a chance to prep for people to show up. So that's why you don't want to show up early, because that's just going to annoy them, I think. You want them to say, this is what we're looking for, and if you're a resource that fits that capability, then you want to show up. And that's the exact idea with that, or that's the exact protocol that we use, at least in my team, which is, if we get a call, we basically go through a few checks. Does this person reasonably want to be found? And what type of resources are you looking for, right? If you're looking for a certain type of dog that we don't have, then, we'll let you know. We don't have that, but we have this. Here's what we're capable of. And then if you want us, you just tell us, and here's our ETA, and here's what we can show up with.
Okay, so we've talked a little about the search and rescue, the K-9s, and the ham radio. So how does all of that tie together? How do the K-9 search and rescue teams utilize ham radio to carry out that role?
Well, let me start off with a quick story. So, when I first joined Argus, we call them ground pounders. I was just a ground pounder, which means I was one of the guys who went off in the woods to go search for the subject, the missing person.
You were the guinea pig.
Well, there were a few times I was also the lost person for them to. We purposely would hide somebody, so you're purposely the lost person to be found. But so I remember we were doing this. It was we do these mocks as trainings, and we do a big mock with Indiana University. There's a class that we have. We usually get somewhere between 20 and 30 students, and we put on this really large mock, and we teach the students all of these skills required for being a search team person, basically a ground pounder. And my role was, as we call them, either a safety or an angel, basically to make sure that, if the team gets lost, they're not really lost. If something happens, there's somebody with some experience out in the woods to help them through whatever the situation is, and make sure that they don't do something that might injure them. They might injure themselves with, right? So that's part of the reason we're there. The other reason is that in Argus, basically everybody is a ham radio operator. And if you've ever been out to Hoosier National Forest, you drive for about 10 minutes, and all of a sudden you no longer have cell phone service when you're driving out there. Well, we drive out about 40 minutes into the forest, so there's really no cell phone service. So we deploy a lot of ham radio equipment, so that way we can communicate with our teams out in the field. So on this mock search that we were doing, I was basically the furthest team away from the net control station. And not only that, but we were on the other side of a ridge. And there were a whole bunch of ridges in between us and the station. So it turned out there were 4 teams deployed, plus then there's net control. And all 4 teams had ham radio operators. Our missions were essentially, we were going in parallel paths along these 4 ridges. The issue was that only one of the teams could actually talk directly to net control, because we don't have a repeater out there. This is in the middle of Hoosier National Forest. There's no power. There's nothing. And we've done the best we can. We've got, basically we've got a portable push-up pole that gets us about 40 feet up in the air with a really nice 2-meter vertical antenna, 50 watts of power. But that doesn't help you when you're in the middle of Hoosier National Forest, on the other side of a ridge, in the middle of, I don't remember when it was, but there was a lot of vegetation and water in the air. So that just limited our signal. What ended up happening was the team next to me could hear me, the team next to them could hear them, and the team next to them could hear them, and then that team could hear net control. So one of the coolest things I'd ever experienced, all 4 of the crews are hiking through the woods. We're not on trails. We are backcountry, like hiking along a ridge, searching for stuff. And we're able to pretty much flawlessly pass traffic without, we're not stopping to write it down. We're not doing anything. But it's going 4 hops to net control and then 4 hops back. That was the most impressive thing I think I'd ever experienced, because I'd done a bunch of the EmComm training, but to actually see it in use in real time, to be able to know exactly what's happening, because you could hear the calling for the other crew, and then the other crew. I mean, it was just, to me, it was one of the coolest experiences to go through that, and to be with other guys who could basically, while hiking, backcountry in the woods, day 2 of sleeping outside at night, and being able to still do this with their radios. It was an impressive event. And that's exactly the point of using our radios. We're out in the backcountry where there isn't a lot of cell phone service. We had a search just this week, actually, and I showed up, looked at my cell phone, and sure enough, I didn't have anything. So what did we use? We used ham radio.
Very good. And, no repeater coverage a lot of times too. So that just emphasizes the point of practicing relays, practicing being on simplex and relaying information down the path, just exactly as you explained, to get it back to where it needs to go. So that is pretty impressive. So you've talked about some of this training. Let's mention some of the training for the dogs, actually, because you've actually gotten involved in that now. You got a dog, Sasha, and Sasha went through some of that training. So talk about the training for the humans as well as the dogs.
Well, let's start with the humans, because that's stuff that people be relatively familiar with. You know, and let me also prefix this with every search team does it differently. So what Argus does doesn't mean that this is the same for what, you know, your local search team is going to do. Now, there are some national standards, and that is what Argus tries to go by. So let me talk about that first. So there's this organization called NASAR, which is kind of like the ARRL of search and rescue for the United States. NASAR stands for National Association for Search and Rescue, and they have a credentialing standard, which, funny, has basically 3 levels to it. It's called the SARTEC, and so there's SARTEC 3, 2, and 1. So if you're a SARTEC 3, you basically have some basic search awareness. SARTEC 2 is essentially field ready, and SARTEC 1 is like advanced, like, so it's kind of like an extra class license, right? Now, you know, those may or may not be required by your state or by your team or whatever it is, but they do exist, and that's one of the things that Argus works towards. So I have a SARTEC 2 certification for myself, and with that is some things like I know how to use a grid reader and a topographical map. So I can basically show you where I am, and without a GPS, I can give you coordinates within about a 10 meter area. So basically there are these squares set up in 1 kilometer dimensions, and then inside of there they have 10 meter lines, and so you can use that to basically give somebody a position within about 10 meters. So
it's kind of like the old grid square thing.
It is the grid square thing, yeah. So if you're talking the ham radio grid square, yeah, kind of like that.
With more precision.
With more precision, yeah. So the idea is that without a GPS or anything like that, I can give you a coordinate, and you can go and find the same item that I found because it's that close. Obviously, we have some GPS training. I use a GPS all the time because, well, it makes life easier. But, you know, the idea is we don't have to rely on it. We also have some basic search skills. So with that, there's a test. I want to say it's 120 question test. And so you have to complete this 120 question test. There's actually a course called FunSAR, which is what we do this big mock for, which prepares you to take your SARTEC 2. So if you pass a FunSAR course, you should be relatively well prepared to take the SARTEC 2 exam. And so then there's some rope skills, like being able to tie an improvised harness, being able to tie an array of different types of knots. There's navigation. And then there's these search skills. So basically, they hide playing cards out in the woods, and you have to go and find them. But you have to walk in a certain area to find them, and you have to find, I think it's like 7 out of 10 cards. And I know it sounds really easy, but it's really not. It's actually kind of difficult. So that's what's involved for the humans. Also, along with that, you know, there's first aid, CPR, some of the basic first responder types of skills that you need. Okay,
and so then tell us about Sasha.
Yeah, so there's an array of different types of dogs, and I'll say, you know, any dog is capable of being trained to do this. Now, it takes the right type of dog with the right type of drive, and I'll talk about drive in a second, to actually to be good at it. So let me start with the types of dogs. Sasha, my dog, is what we call an area or wilderness area dog. She is not scent specific. Her job is to find any human in the area. So basically, if you're lost and we have no idea where you are, we have no real direction of travel, we call it, or a place last seen or anything like that, but we have a relatively good idea that you are in some area. That is when we will use a dog like Sasha. And her job is to go and basically search this whole big area and tell me, the handler, that she's found them. So that's her job. And so that's what we call an area dog. Then we have tracking trailing dogs. These are the types of dogs that most people probably think of. These are dogs that are trained to basically follow a scent trail. So if you have, let's say that you were out and you got lost and you accidentally left a glove behind. We would use that glove as the scent article, and the dog is going to follow that individual scent trail to the subject. And it's usually fairly close to the actual path traversed. I mean, depending on wind and other conditions like that, it can go several, even 100 feet off, but generally we want them following as close as possible to the trail. Then we have another type of dog, which is human remains detection. This is obviously looking for somebody who's been deceased. And so, maybe day 2 or 3 of a search is when we'll start using this type of dog. And obviously their goal is to find, a deceased person. And then there's also a disaster dog. And these disaster dogs are what you think of for essentially FEMA. They are collapsed structures. These are the types of dogs that were used during 9/11. So they're basically trained to be able to safely navigate rubble piles and locate buried subjects who are still alive in the rubble piles. So those are the 4 types of dogs. And as you can imagine, the training for those types of dogs can vary quite a bit. There's a few key aspects, though, that we kind of are looking at, though. First is drive. And drive is, if you've ever seen a lab who just will not stop bringing you the ball, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a dog who will do anything to play with the ball with you. You can throw the ball into a big field, and the dog will spend 30 minutes until it actually finds that ball, and come back and say, "Throw it again." So we're looking for what we call drive. So in my case, Sasha's drive is very much food based. If you want a backflip, you just hold food up long enough, and eventually she's going to do a backflip for you. And so we used food for Sasha. So when she finds a subject at practice, she gets a treat. And usually I make them really, really good treats. Treats that we only get at practice, because otherwise, if she gets it every day, then it's not quite the same. And it's the same way for the other dogs. So a lot of dogs that people use today are either German Shepherds, Malinois, Labs, and these dogs are very much into what we call tugging. They want to tug. They've got these tug toys, and basically you hold this tug toy, and even these little tiny dogs can pull me around, and it's very cool, and it can be very intense. So basically we're using this drive, though, to get them to do what we want. And so we'll start. So let's take the area dog, like Sasha, really quick. We start off with very simple games, right? We teach come, so that way every time I say come, Sasha comes right to me and sits right in front of me. That's what we teach. And then we start turning it into a little game of, let's say, come back and forth, where she'll come to me, she'll come to somebody else, she comes back to me, she gets a treat. So that's kind of the process. And then eventually we start taking out the commands, and we just say, so then it starts off with just go find. And then there's a person just standing out in the field. She goes to that person, comes back to me, does her what we call alert, and then she gets her reward. And so we kind of build this process until it becomes, 30 minutes. The person's been hidden for 30 minutes out in a 20-acre field, and now Sasha has to go find them, and it takes, 30 minutes for her to actually find the person. So that's how we kind of grow it. And then there's this last part, which I kind of mentioned, which is the alert. And this is probably the most critical part to the dog training. Dogs will naturally be able to find anything in the woods, right? If they know that they're going to get their reward, they will very easily find, a human or a deer or a duck. The training is basically it's hunt. We want them to hunt for the person. That just comes basically naturally to the dogs. But the part that doesn't is what we call the alert. And this is the most probably critical part in their training, which is to get the dog to do some behavior that indicates that they have found the person. And there's a whole lot of different alerts involved. So, for example, with area dogs, there are two big ones that I know about. The refind, which is what Sasha does. So when she finds the subject, she runs back to me, barks at me, and then when I say, show me, she runs back to the subject and barks at them. Another type is called a bark and hold, and this is exactly like it sounds. Basically, when the dog finds the subject, they sit there and bark at them. And even if the human keeps moving, the dog just keeps following them, barking at them, and the bark basically brings the rest of the team in. Now, for other types of dogs, let's say HRD or a tracking trailing dog, the alert could be something else, such as sitting down, laying down, could be a bark, could even be a touch. So any number of things can be the alert for any of these dogs. But it's really critical to have that alert be a very consistent and well done thing. That I think that a lot of time needs to be spent in training that alert and getting that alert to be just so natural that the dog doesn't even think about it.
That's really great. I'm really impressed with all that you've been able to do with that. And right now it's time for us to pay some of the bills. But we're going to come back and talk a little more with AJ and take your calls right after this message from Tower Electronics right here on Ham Talk Live.
This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by Tower Electronics. Tower Electronics has been the Ham's dime store since 1978, bringing connectors, antennas, cables, and other parts to the world. Scott and Jill travel the country bringing their store to you at Hamfest, but you can also order online at pl-259.com or by calling 920-435-2973. Stock up on those supplies like PL259 and N connectors, audio cables, mobile antennas, and ham sticks. Their silver-plated N connectors are even in use on the International Space Station. Tower Electronics is a dealer for MFJ, Comet, Daiwa, OPEC, Workman, and Ham Pro Technologies. Tower Electronics online at pl-259.com, proud to sponsor this episode of Ham Talk Live.
Join the conversation. Call us on voice with Skype at Ham Talk Live or give us a call at 812-NET-HAM1. That's 812-638-4261. Now, here's more Ham Talk Live.
We'd like to thank Scott and Jill at Tower Electronics for sponsoring the show tonight and every night so we can bring you Ham Talk Live. Call 920-435-2973, or you can visit their website at pl-259.com And be sure to listen every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time right here on hamtalklive.com. And if you missed the show, you can download the podcast from the website and most popular podcasting websites. So you've heard a little bit about the search and rescue and the EmComm stuff and the K-9s. So it's now time for your calls. So if you have a question that you want to ask AJ about any of this stuff we've been talking about tonight, give us an audio call on Skype. It's Ham Talk Live is the username. Or you can call us by telephone. It's 812-NET-HAM-1. 812-NET-HAM-1. 812-638-4261. And ask a question about some of the training that Argus is involved in and some of these search and rescue teams. And before I forget, AJ, can you give us the web addresses of some places that if people want to get some more information about some of these national organizations as well as local ones, can you give us those web addresses real quick?
Yeah, so NASAR is the big one. So that is National Association for Search and Rescue, and they are nasar.org. That's nasar.org, nasar.org. And really, that is probably the best place to go and find local search teams. Now, granted, you can probably Google and find, a search team in your area. For example, Argus is Argus, A-R-G-U-S, K9.org. So you can go check out our website there. Sasha's pictures up there along with mine. And you can also find Argus on Facebook. So go ahead and like us on Facebook if you want. And I try and post regular pictures and updates on the team. And you can see, when the dogs are, even though it's been, 95 with 100% relative humidity, we're still out practicing because you never know when you're going to get called to a search.
Yeah, always be prepared, and that's a good thing. So thanks for those links. And if you're interested in more about this search and rescue team thing, why check those out. Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask is, if someone does not have a dog and just wants to get involved in search and rescue, what are some ways that people can volunteer to help the search and rescue teams, either in training or in a real event?
Well, so obviously, if like I said, ground pounders are just as important as the K-9 handlers. Without the ground pounders, the K-9 handlers are a lot less effective. And I call them ground pounders lovingly because what I always say is everybody who gets deployed on a search is a ground pounder first. Even if I get called to a search and they don't need a live find area dog like Sasha, I am then just a ground pounder. And, truthfully, I love just walking through the woods. And so if you like that kind of stuff, then you can become just a ground pounder. You don't need a dog. You can find a NASAR class near you. So the FunSAR class is, in my experience, the NASAR class that I help with here in Bloomington is a lot of fun. I met a lot of friends through it. It's just a great class in general. And even if you're not interested in search and rescue, but you like the outdoors, it's still a fun class. You get to sleep outside. You get to go hike through the woods during the day, at night. Some stuff that you might not normally do. So it's a lot of fun.
And if you like to go play hide and seek.
And if you like, when we do practice, we say that search and rescue is really just hide and seek for adults. That's the best way to describe it, because literally we say, okay, I want you to go in this area and don't tell me where you are because the dog is going to go find you. And so one of the things let's say that you don't have time or you don't want to be called out to an actual search, that's fine. Especially for K-9 teams, one of the things that they always need is people to volunteer to be their lost subjects. Now, that doesn't mean go get lost and call the search and rescue team and say, I'm a lost subject. That means contact your local search and rescue team, say, I'd like to come out and be a lost subject for you, and then they will assist you in getting lost.
Yeah, so don't go out there and just self-deploy getting lost.
Yes, we will specific, because when the dogs are at different levels in their training, we want different things. So a young dog isn't going to go search a 30-acre field. A young dog is going to search a really small field, to get that experience and to get the whole alert and all that kind of stuff down. So the team is going to have very specific requests of you. But they should teach you everything you need to know to just be a subject. That should be a relatively quick process to show you this is what the dog does. This is what to expect when you're out there. So yeah, if you're wanting to help, you can do that. During a real incident, I recommend just kind of staying out of the way unless the team requests something. Right? If you get a request for kind of need pizza or sandwiches or something, okay, that's where it can get useful. But one of the reasons why we don't have just regular hams helping us out most of the time is that with search and rescue, there's a very specific language that we speak. And so we really want people who know how to speak that same language as us. And so that's why we while there might be a lot of hams in the area, we really don't invite them to come and help us during a search, because we need you to be able to speak this very specific language that we speak.
Very good. 812-NET-HAM1, 812-NET-HAM1. We do have just a couple of minutes left. If you have a question, or you can tweet us at HamTalkLive if you want to ask a question about the K-9 search and rescue. So, got just about a minute here. So your training exercises, how long do those usually go?
Well, I think the first thing to say is we usually practice 2 to 3 times a week, or at least my team does. I don't really know what others are doing, but my team usually practices 2 to 3 times a week. Usually we're practicing from about 6:30 in the evening till about 9 o'clock. So throughout the year, that gives us an array of, basically right now, it's sunny the whole time. It'll be, in the middle of winter, it's already blackout by about 5:30. So, the entire practice will be in the dark at that point. But usually practice is somewhere between, depending on, it really depends on the number of dogs and humans that show up. So we actually try and do, so we have practice for the dogs 2 to 3 times a week. We try and also do a practice for human stuff once a month, maybe once every other month, depending on how busy we are. And that's just to keep the human skills up to snuff as well. Now, our dog practices basically rotate through dogs. We will hide a subject, we will hide some sources, which is what the HRD dogs alert on, and we will maybe lay a track or two for a tracking trailing dog, and we kind of go through and we work basically one dog at a time, because we don't have that many dogs. And so we go through and we try and give each dog basically 2 or 3 problems. And some of those problems are going to be 30 seconds where they're just, hey, this is what we're doing now. Remember, this is what we're doing for the dog. And then we'll do a long problem. For Sasha, that's generally what we'll do. We'll do something really easy just to get her brain into the right mode.
Very good.
That might be something just like, it's a 50-foot problem with somebody hiding behind a rock. And then we'll do a long problem where, okay, now we're searching this 10-acre field, and they might not even be in this 10-acre field. So the Sandler has to actually call a blank and say, my dog has searched this, there's nobody here.
We are out of time, but tune in next week. We're going to be talking about scouting. So 7375, and may the good DX be yours.